All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to tackle one of the most epic stories in all of human history. Seriously, it's a tale that has everything: unbelievable ambition, mind-blowing military genius, and, yes, a spectacular and tragic downfall. We are, of course, talking about the one and only Alexander the Great.
I want you to just picture this for a second. What if a 20-year-old, a kid, really, barely an adult, just decides one day, you know what, I'm going to conquer the entire known world? It sounds like the plot of a fantasy novel, right? Well, the crazy thing is, it actually happened. And this wasn't some daydream. We have to ask, how on earth did this prince, from a kingdom most people would consider a backwater, manage to topple the global superpowers of his day? What was his secret sauce? Was he just a brilliant strategist? Was he impossibly lucky? Or was there something else at play? But here's the real twist, the heart of the tragedy. Why did the man who achieved more than anyone could possibly imagine, the man who ruled over millions and commanded unstoppable armies, end up dying, mysteriously, at just 32 years old? That's the great paradox of his life, and that's what we're going to unpack today. So, to really understand the Conqueror, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the boy. Was this relentless, world-consuming drive something he was just born with, or was he meticulously sculpted for greatness? Let's take a look. Now, Alexander certainly got a head start. He was born into power, the son of King Philip II of Macedon. And his father was a force of nature in his own right, a brilliant, tough-as-nails commander who turned Macedon into a military powerhouse. But maybe the single most strategic move Philip ever made wasn't on a battlefield. It was hiring a tutor for his son. And not just any tutor, he hired the Aristotle. Yeah, that Aristotle. And that one decision would change everything. This really gets to the core of it. Aristotle didn't just drill facts and figures into Alexander's head. No, he taught him philosophy, logic, ethics. He taught him how to think about the world, not just as it was, but as it could be. It wasn't just about knowledge. It was about building a framework for his ambition. You could almost say Aristotle installed the operating system, the vision that would one day run the hardware of his world-conquering army. And you can see this unique way of thinking in action long before he ever led a charge. Take the legendary story of Bucephalus. There was this magnificent, wild horse that no one could tame. Experienced warriors, seasoned horsemen, they all tried and failed. But Alexander, just a kid, he didn't just see a wild animal. He saw the problem. He noticed the horse wasn't just vicious, it was terrified of its own shadow. So what does he do? He doesn't use force, he uses insight. He simply turns the horse to face the sun, so its shadow disappears behind it. And just like that, he calms the beast. His father reportedly saw this and said, "My son, Macedonia is too small for you." He had no idea how right he was. So you've got this young man with a mind shaped by the greatest thinker of his time and a spirit that's already proven itself fearless. He's basically a ticking clock of destiny. But destiny didn't knock politely. It kicked the door down, violently, and far sooner than anyone expected. He's only 20 when his father is murdered. In that moment of absolute chaos, the whole kingdom could have just shattered. Rivals popped up everywhere, subject cities saw their chance to rebel. But Alexander, he didn't hesitate for a second. He moved with a speed and a ruthlessness that was just shocking. He didn't just defeat the rebellions, he made a terrifying example of the city of Thebes by razing it to the ground. The message was sent loud and clear. The boy is gone, a king is in his place, an absolute, unstoppable king. With his home turf secure, Alexander turned his gaze east. He took up his father's dream, which now became his all-consuming obsession, the Persian Empire. You have to understand, this was the undisputed superpower of the day. It was vast, ancient, and fabulously wealthy. On paper, this was a suicide mission, a tiny kingdom against a global empire. The question on everyone's lips was, could he actually pull this off? The answer was a deafening yes. In 334 BCE, he launches his invasion, and what followed is a campaign that military colleges still study today. It was just a blur of shocking victories. He wins decisively at Granicus. Then at Issus, he comes face-to-face with the Persian king, Darius III, and beats him so badly, Darius flees the battlefield. The final, crushing blow comes at Gaugamela, and with that, the Persian Empire, the greatest power on earth, just crumbles. Alexander, the young king from Macedon, is now hailed as the king of Asia. But here's the thing. For a guy like Alexander, conquering the world's biggest empire, that wasn't the finish line. That was just the warm-up. And this is where the story takes a huge turn, not just across the map, but inside his own head. He stops seeing himself as a mere king and starts to believe he's something more. He marches into Egypt, and they welcome him as a liberator from Persian rule. They declare him pharaoh, and by Egyptian custom, the pharaoh is a living god. But Alexander takes it a step further. He makes this incredibly dangerous journey deep into the desert to visit the famous oracle of Siwa. And there, the priests allegedly greeted him not as a king, but as the son of Zeus, the king of all gods. And did he believe it? All signs point to yes. Over time, he absolutely did. And this belief began to fundamentally change who he was.
And this slide just lays out the internal conflict perfectly. Look at these two columns. On the one hand, you have the inspirer. This was the young Alexander, the guy who led from the front, who charged into battle alongside his men. He was known for his respect for his enemies. He inspired a kind of loyalty that was so fierce, his men would have followed him into hell itself. But as his power grew, as this belief in his own divinity took root, the tyrant started to emerge. He began demanding that his own Greek soldiers bow down and worship him. He became paranoid, executing old friends over mere suspicions of treason. The loyalty he once earned was slowly, chillingly, being replaced by absolute fear.
His ambition, which now seemed to have no limits, just kept pushing him eastward. He wanted to go to the very edge of the world. And this relentless drive took him and his exhausted army into a new, mysterious land, India. And it was here that his godlike ambition was about to collide head-on with human reality. The year is 326 BCE. Alexander is facing King Porus in India at the Battle of the Hydaspes River. Now, Porus's army had something the Macedonians had never really dealt with before: war elephants, terrifying tank-like beasts. But even then, Alexander's tactical brilliance was on full display. He used creative maneuvers to outwit them and won another incredible victory. But it was a brutal, bloody, hard-fought win, and it came at a huge cost to his men. After the battle, Alexander, true to form, wanted to keep going, push further east. But his army? They'd finally hit the wall. They had reached their breaking point. These men had been marching and fighting for nearly a decade. They were thousands upon thousands of miles from home. They were tired, they were wounded, they were homesick. They had conquered the world for him. It was enough. And so, for the very first time in his life, Alexander gave an order, and his men refused to obey. That was it. No more. It wasn't a violent mutiny. It was something much more powerful. A quiet, firm, united refusal. They were done. They would not go one step further. And in that moment, the God King, the invincible conqueror, was defeated. Not by an enemy army, but by the exhaustion of his own loyal soldiers. His dream of reaching the Eastern Ocean was shattered. For the first time, his will had been broken. The long march home was no victory lap. It was a descent into darkness, both for the army and for Alexander's soul. The great dream was over, and the brutal reality of what he'd become and the emptiness of what he'd built began to set in. Alexander chose a punishing route home right through the Gedrosian Desert. It was a death march. Thousands of his soldiers died of thirst, heat, and starvation. This brutal journey seemed to harden him, to curdle whatever humanity was left. His paranoia went into overdrive. He executed generals and governors he felt had let him down. The inspirational leader was now almost completely gone, replaced by a tyrant ruling through sheer terror. Finally, back in Babylon, the heart of his new empire, the end came with shocking speed. In 323 BCE, after a banquet, he got sick, a fever. And over the course of about 10 days, the most powerful man in the world just wasted away. Then he was gone. He was only 32. What killed him? Malaria? Typhoid fever? Was he poisoned? We'll probably never know, but the irony is staggering. The man who conquered the world couldn't conquer a fever. And what about the empire he bled for? It disintegrated almost the second he died. He never named a clear heir. On his deathbed, when they asked who he left his empire to, he supposedly whispered, "To the strongest." Well, that's like tossing a steak to a pack of hungry wolves. His top generals, the Diadochi, immediately started a series of bloody civil wars, tearing his creation apart. His empire was held together by one thing, his will. And when he was gone, it all turned to dust. So what do we take away from this incredible, tragic life?
The lessons are absolutely timeless. Dream big, because a powerful vision really can change the world. Courage and knowledge are an unstoppable combination. But his story is also maybe the ultimate cautionary tale. It's a warning about hubris, that deadly pride that Aristotle himself wrote about. It became his fatal flaw. It proves that leadership needs balance, because the moment you let fear completely replace respect, the foundations of everything you've built will begin to crack. Which leaves us with this final burning question. We call him Alexander the Great. He redrew the map of the ancient world. He spread Greek culture from Europe to India, an influence that we can still feel today. But he built an empire that was entirely dependent on him, a house of cards that couldn't stand without him holding it up. He conquered lands, but in the end, maybe he lost himself. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Was he truly great? Or was he just, for a brief, brilliant moment, unstoppable?